Italian food isn't just one cuisine like pizza or pasta or gelato for that matter, but instead it's a reflection of history, of geography, and local traditions. So, what I want to do in this video is help you understand how geography and agriculture have shaped cuisine, how historical influences played a role, and give you an idea about what you might want to eat in each region, and talk a bit about the slow food movement. What is that, and how does it impact the Italian food scene today? The first thing that you should know, though, is if you take a look at Italy, you see the geography here. And when we look at the geography, we see the Alps in the north, we see the Apennine Mountains running along the spine of Italy. Then we see off the left coast there, off the west coast of Italy, we see Sardinia, which is a large island. And then right off the toe of the boot, which is Calabria, we see Sicily. So all these different islands, all these separated regions. We see different valleys. So there are many reasons that we find some differences in the food. And another reason would have to do with the influences that we had historically. If we look at northern Italy and you see just how mountainous it is here in the Dolomites, well, we had South Tyrol and Trentino. These were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So you might find things like beer and dumplings and strudel and smoked meats quite common here. So you find different kind of foods depending on where you are. If we move down to the Po Valley, for example, so moving down a little bit further, that was that flat area we saw right below the Alps. We noticed we might have some rice fields here. It's a very fertile valley and place to grow things. So we have risotto dishes. We have things made with corn, and then we have cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano and Grana Padano because it's a good place for cows to graze and produce that sort of cheese. If we go to Central Italy, you may be familiar with this kind of iconic view of the Tuscan countryside, but you can see the olive groves. You can see that a lot of wine is produced here, but of course, wine is produced and enjoyed all over Italy. So if we think about the kind of foods we have here, though, we might have things more like grilled meats, wild boar, because there's wild boar that roams in this area, pecorino cheese, and then certain special kinds of pasta like the pici pasta, which we find in Tuscany, and wines like the Chianti or Montepulciano. Southern Italy, we have much different cuisine too. And again, a lot of this depends on the climate. While in the north, it's colder and you might have some heartier dishes. In the south, it might be based more on the abundant tomatoes that grow and it is so flavorful. Although they're, of course, distributed all throughout Italy. Or you might have things like eggplant, pasta alla norma is a dish made with eggplant in Sicily. Calabria, we find spicy foods, and they're appreciated a bit more in the south. We see there is citrus, so we have the famous lemons of Sorrento, and then we have things like olives in Puglia. They have these olive trees that are just centuries old. And there's a lot of historical influence too that plays a role in the food. The Romans, they cultivated grain, and sometimes these ancient grains actually worked their way back into Italian food today. They're in vogue. They produced olive oil, they produced wine, so things that we still see today in Italy. And then in the Middle Ages, we had the Arab cultures bringing sugar and rice and citrus foods and things made with almonds. So we see a lot of that, particularly in Sicily and areas where the Arabs happen to have an influence in Italy. And then we talked about the Austrian and the German influence in the north. And we sometimes find things like hearty, heavy stews in northeastern Italy. That would be Friuli, Venezia, Giulia. So, how do we know what to eat where we're going? We'll definitely eat what's seasonal. So, Italians eat with the season. So, if something is being fresh or harvested, you certainly want to do that. If you're on the coast, then go for the seafood because seafood is more than likely fairly common on the coast. When you're inland, go for the meat dishes. When it's autumn, for example, you might want to go for mushrooms and truffles. In the winter, when citrus is fresh, that would be a good time to have the citrus, and tomatoes, of course, in the summer. Um, Now, what kind of dishes? Well, know the local dishes that are part of that region. So in Milan, you might have risotto alla milanese or ossobuco, whereas in Bologna, you might have tagliatelle al ragù. Florence, we have the bistec alla Fiorentina. Rome, we have carbonara and amatriciana or cacio e pepe. Naples, we have, of course, Neapolitan pizza, and one of my favorites is the pastry sfogliatella. Sfogliatella kind of looks like a clamshell and has these beautiful, crusty, crunchy kind of layers, and is filled with a ricotta, lemon, and sort of sweet filling. And then in Sicily, you have the cannoli, pasta alla norma, arancini. Arancini are rice balls, so they're balls of rice that are fried. Something else you can do to eat well by the region is take a look at the labels. There's some things on there called DOP, which stands for Protected Designation of Origin, or IGP, which is another variation of that. And what these do is they tell you that these are authentic, locally produced foods, and they're also produced according to certain regulations in Italy. So looking for DOP or IGP on the label is a great way to make sure eating food that is produced in Italy and authentic. All right, let's talk about the slow food movement. I think it's important you understand it. In 1986, they opened this McDonald's in Rome at the foot of the Spanish Steps, this iconic monument in Rome. And there were some people who weren't very happy about it. So they created kind of a counterculture movement. What they wanted to do is they wanted to sustain rural communities. They wanted to make sure that people had access to authentic food, preserve the history and the traditions in producing food, and think about food as an identity. So eating food is part of the slow food movement, and many of these DOP and IGP foods are like that, or going to areas that specialize in slow foods. And in fact, there are even slow cities in Italy where you can experience that slow food culture quite personally. So those are great ways to do it. So they focus on preserving the heritage breeds, so things you've had for many, many, many years, hundreds, if not thousands of years. So really, my final thought on this is to experience Italian food. You want to eat local, you want to eat seasonal, you want to understand the traditions and why Italian food is a bit different. And as much as possible, support those small producers to ensure we can keep that food heritage alive.